Well, hello. Happy Midsummer. It is Liam from the Ælfric Homily Project here on YouTube, and I have another extra video for you. It's been a few months since I've done one of these, and I felt like there was an appropriate time to do this one, as I'm not doing a homily or accompanying lecture on Midsummer, which seems like a pretty important holiday to me. And so I just want to go over a little bit of Midsummer. This is kind of like, if you haven't watched one of these before, but you've watched one of the supplementary longer lectures, this is essentially like one of those, but it's only the beginning portion. So since we're not going over an actual text, I'm not going to look at a lot of the words. We're not going to go over a lot of the philology, and we're not going to go over like the codicology of it, since we're not going to look at the actual text as well in the manuscript. So I'm just going to go quickly over kind of the idea of midsummer, mostly culturally speaking, with lots of quotes and some pictures. So anyways, so midsummer, which gets us into what Sunstead is, John the Baptist, and the solstice, of course. And we'll get into all of that. And this, of course, is an illumination from Ethelwald's, I think, benedictional there at the back, which is actually the nativity of John the Baptist, and why that is connected to midsummer, and why I'm releasing this video actually on June 24th rather than on June 20th, when astronomically, celestially speaking, that was the solstice. Well, we'll talk about it. So this is actually the feast of John the Baptist. That is what Midsummer lines up with for the Anglo-Saxons. And so you have on the 12th of Calendus Julius. So that is Roman calendar stuff. I'll probably actually link a Roman calendar. It's calendarbead.com. It explains in a chart very easily how the Roman dating system worked. So the 12th calends of July is actually the 20th of June. So we'll go into that. So on the 20th of June is the sunstead. That is, I put in here twice, sorry, in Latin, solstice, and in English, midsummer. So the date of midsummer was actually, was recognized by the early English to be the 20th of June, somewhere around there, right? Depending on the year, right? But celebrations were held on the 24th. Likewise, Bede says the winter solstice is the 21st of December, but was traditionally the 25th and lined up with the birth of Christ. And so Christmas is celebrated on that later date, on the 25th, even though it doesn't actually line up during Bede's time with the solstice anymore. So the 24th is the celebration of the Nativity of John the Baptist, and that is when Midsummer is celebrated. He is Johannes Sepultura, of course, which is John the Baptist. To full, someone is to baptize them in Old English. And so this date, of course, is 6 months before Christmas, and it is one of the oldest liturgical celebrations, right? This has been in the Christian calendar for many, 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 many centuries. And so an important day as well. And so even though, again, we see up here, it is recognized as being on the 20th of June, the midsummer celebrations would have actually been on the 24th, which is why this is coming out today on the feast of St. John the Baptist. So the winter solstice as well also had some pre-Christian significance. We know for sure that there's likely a earlier celebration at midwinter, and so the summer solstice likely did as well, but we have quite literally no evidence of this, and so we can't say for sure. It's just a good guess, right? What that celebration would be like, we'll talk about a little bit here later, as you can kind of connect with some holidays from similar time, from similar peoples, well, not different cultures from an early medieval perspective. I'll say there. This is a the picture of June for Anglo-Saxon calendar right here. So 11th century. That's the manuscript, British Library, Con Tiberius B5. Right, so the sun stands still in the middle of summer. Here is that illumination from the benedictional. That's the whole thing with John the Baptist and Elizabeth and his mother up top. And then we have solstice, right, which means is sun. The word sun is sol in Latin. Sistere, which is to sit in place or stand still. It can mean a couple other things, but in this case, that's what it means. So sol is actually a word for sun in Old English, and it's not from Latin. They both, sol in Latin, sol in Old English, comes from the same Proto-Indo-European source. So does sun. I believe sun is from the oblique stem, where sol comes from. There's actually several words for for sun in Old English. There's sol, there's ciel, there is swale, there's sunna. So there's a lot of words, and that's a different topic. But the common word in Old English is sunna. Seemingly, that's what survived at least. So sunnested or sunstead, right, is therefore a calque, essentially, of the Latin term. Ælfric and others would know that solstice means the sun standing still, and that's exactly what sunstead means. And so sunstead would be in modern English, would be sunstead or so. That's pretty common for them to calculate these Latin terms. Just like goldspellere, right, would be like evangelist, right? And so while today the solstice marks the beginning of summer, though, traditionally May 9th through August 6th would be summer that season, which I don't know why I'm capitalizing it here, but a little rushed anyways. But so midsummer was the middle of the season. And so we just started summer technically on the 20th, at least where I am, but traditionally it's actually the middle of summer. And that is hence the name. So again, we have that birth of John the Baptist. And so I want to look up real quick at the Mineralogium, lines 106 to 119, just very briefly. In fact, I'm not even going to look at the Old English because I don't want this video to be too long. It is there if you want to look at it, but if you just look at my translation. Then the month brings, after 2 and 4 long days, this is of course a continuation, talking about some stuff in May beforehand, before Letha to town for us. So before Letha is the name of the month of June. And then there's after Letha, which is July, right? Letha, these terms meaning mild, right? It's the word lithe in modern English. So June into the dwellings, in which the gem ascends into the heavens up highest in the year. And so that is talking about the solstice. The sun has ascended to the point. And of course, the sunstead itself in solstice, the sun doesn't actually stop, but that was a Roman belief that the sun stopped for a moment and then started going down the other way. So most radiant of stars, and from its place descends to its setting sinks. It wishes then longer to behold the earth and go later over the fields of the world of the fairest of lights, the created world. Then the thing of glory, after 13, this is, the syntax of this is a little clunky, translating it as directly as I did. But the prince's darling, John in days of yore was born, year days, Yar Dachan, just like the opening lines of Beowulf, Yar Dachum, right? 10 nights also, we then keep that tide in midsummer in great excellence, or honor, or whatever, right? Nobility, something. And so this is talking about, again, midsummer, and we're associating it with St. John. And so from Ælfric's De Temporibus Anni, we have 4 seasons are reckoned in the year, that is, ver, estas, autumnus, hiems. Ver is spring, or lengthened tide, which has an equinox. Estas is summer, or summa, which has a solstice. Autumn is autumn, or harvest in Old English, which has the other equinox. Hiems is winter, or winter in Old English, which has the other solstice. When the day grows longer, the sun goes northwards until it comes to the sign which is called Cancer. Summer solstice is there, because there it turns back again southwards, and then the day grows shorter until the sun comes again south of the winter solstice, and there stands still. When it is moving northwards, it makes a spring equinox in the middle of its course, and when it is moving south, it makes the autumnal equinox. The further south it goes, the closer winter is, and the winter chill follows after it. But when it turns again, then it drives away the winter chill with its hot rays. And so where is it turning? In fact, it turns in the middle of the seasons that are associated with opposites. So it's middle of summer, right? But now it's the start of summer. But again, traditionally, it would have been the middle of summer, the hottest season, and at the peak of summer, the sun turns to colder days. And it doesn't get to that lowest point until Christmas time, the winter solstice, which now, again, would be midwinter traditionally, but it is now the start of winter. And that is when it goes to its lowest, and then we start rising towards light in the longest day, again, here in the summer solstice. I took this from Eleanor Parker's blog, actually, and it's translated by her, because I didn't quite have the time to translate all this myself. Though I did translate some of it myself, like the Mineralogium. So anyways, so it is the longest day. On Anglelanda havde sig longest dag, 17 tida. On tham yrkan aarde northe waardan beelth leucht nichte on sumera. Swirche hit alle nicht dagia, swaswawe silva foroft die sawen. So in England, the longest day has 17 hours. In the same land northward is the night, is light in summer, as if all night were day, rather, sorry, just as we ourselves have very often seen. And then we have This is a very similar thing you would see in Ælfric's work, or Bede's similar work, or even something like Isidore Seville's works. They're very common in the Middle Ages. Actually, I'm not even sure which one this is from, but this is something you would see very common in like a Computus manuscript. All right, and then we do have Bede's. So Bede's De Temporum Ratione. So very many of the church's teachers recount that our Lord was conceived and suffered on the 8th of Calends of April, so the 25th of March, at the spring equinox. So that's the day he was conceived, and so it makes sense that was also the day that he died. We went over that in the lecture for Annunciation. Yeah, and that he was born at the winter solstice on the 8th calends of January, 25th of December, of course. All right, 9 months later. And again, that the Lord's blessed precursor and Baptist was conceived at the autumn equinox on the 8th calends of October, so the 24th of September, and born at the summer solstice on the 8th calends of July, which is the 24th of June, so 9 months later, of course. To this, they add the explanation that it was fitting that the creator of eternal light should be conceived and born along with the increase of temporal light, and that the herald of penance, who must decrease, should be engendered and born at a time when then light is diminishing. And so, as the herald of penance, John, must decrease, the light starts decreasing right at his birth. But it is in tandem with Christ, right? It's not like against Christ, it's just in tandem, right? And so we also have a little excerpt from Christ for Ælfric's first series homily on the Nativity of St. John, again, for the 24th of June. I didn't have time to translate this. This is again taken from Eleanor Parker. This is just a couple bits of it. He was ascend beforan driftna swaswa se dægsteorra, gath beforan ðære sunnan, swaswa bider at foran deman, swaswa seo alde I kithnis at foran ðære nivan. Forthans they seo alde I was swirche shabu, and seo niwa I kithnis is solfastness through his halendis eva. So he was sent before the Lord as the day star goes before the sun, as the beetle goes before the judge, as the Old Testament before the New. Because the old law was like a shadow, and the New Testament is the truth itself, through the grace of the Savior, or the healer is how I would normally translate that. I wanted to. This is one of my favorite pieces of art. Actually, it's a International Gothic style, very very late 14th century. Might have even been finished as late as 1399, which is the year that Richard II was deposed. Actually, who is the kneeling figure here on the right? He's actually bowing to the Virgin Mary on the diptych has two parts. It's named diptych. Right, and so the other part, which I didn't include here, has Mary in her very typical later medieval blue. Also very beautiful. Just here, I wanted to highlight John the Baptist, who is the figure on the right. In the middle is Edward the Confessor, and on the left is Edmund the Martyr. These are both English kings. Edmund the Martyr is a king of East Anglia, so not an English king so much, and then Edward the Confessor is king of England. One of the last. As it were, they were actually considered, both Edmund and Edward were the patron saints of England until the cult of St. George became popular after some of the Crusades. So it's interesting that England would lose its patron saints to a foreign saint. Very interesting, I think. Personally, I think venerating these ones make a bit more sense. But I'm also not English, so I guess it doesn't matter. Anyways, so. And then here's another chunk of that Ælfric homily. I'm not going to read the Old English this time. Again, I don't want this video to be too long. The point of these are to be short and pithy. So you can follow along the Old English or pause this if you want to read it. But again, this is Eleanor Parker's translation as well this time. So it is not without meaning that the herald's birth at this season came to pass when the earthly day is waning, and the Lord's birth when it is waxing. This meaning John himself revealed with these words: "It is fitting for Christ that he should increase, and for me that I should decrease." John became known to people through his famous actions, earlier than Christ was, because he did not reveal his divine power before he had lived 30 years in human nature. So it seemed to the people that he was a prophet and that John was Christ. But then Christ made himself known through great signs, and his fame waxed throughout all the world, that he was true God, who had previously seemed a prophet. Truly John's fame was waning, because he was recognized as a prophet and herald of the heavenly prince, who a little while before was believed to be Christ by uncertain guesses. This waning is betokened by the waning day at the season of his birth. An increasing day at the Savior's birth signifies his increasing power according to his human nature. And then I just wanted to get a little bit into some of the cultural aspects of this, just very briefly. And there's like maybe another slide left. But bonfires and wart and ghost and lament. The first three kind of connect maybe a bit clearly, but In the Middle Ages and afterwards, bonfires on St. John's Eve were a widespread custom. I was planning on having one myself. And then it is an especially magical a night for ghosts and love divination. Also, lastingly popular was the idea found in the Anglo-Saxon medical remedies that plants gathered at midsummer had special potency. St. John's wort, which gets its name because of flowers at this time of the year, was used to decorate houses at midsummer and shared the healing and protective powers attributed to St. John's bonfires. And so then you have some of the aspects. Again, those bonfires might be a leftover from pagan things. You get similar bonfire ideas in other summer rituals for other cultures, but there's no strict evidence for this at all. And so, one thing also, if you go back to the idea of 17 hours earlier, that's a long day. That's a long day to be awake with a very short night, right, on solstice or sunset or midsummer. And this is actually from the wife's lament, which is very particular to mention that she is lamenting in the summer. And so, like, sometimes you'll see images of winter, right, like in the Seafarer or something like that, right? You have these winter images, which are very fitting with exile and stuff like that. Then you have this one from the wife's lament, which is very obviously from the point of view of a woman. And what does she have? She has a long day to deal with these emotions, right? It's there I must sit all the summer long day. It's a long day, right? Longer than the winter's long day. And there I may weep for my exile. And so it's interesting now, yeah, also that contrast. Maybe it's the long winter's night that is really bringing depression. And in this case, though, the summer long day, right? The day is long, not the night. Right, and then I think this is my last slide. Yes. All right, so for medieval Christians, this is again, these are both actually from Eleanor Parker's Winters in the World. This is a book I look at for a lot of these cultural aspects on this channel for this project. But I actually haven't looked at it previously in this presentation yet. So briefly, though, for medieval Christians, the concurrence of the solstice with these key feasts. Oh, sorry, the last slide was also from the book, which is why it's not mentioned on the reference. But so the concurrence of the solstice, these key feasts, made the cycle of the sun a revelation of the plan of their creator. So understanding the calendar offers knowledge that can be beneficial in all kinds of ways, spiritual and practical. Knowing when to celebrate Easter, when to let blood, and when to perform this ritual to cure sick cattle are all related forms of knowledge, depending on similar kinds of calendrical data. They share an attitude to the natural world in which the bodies of humans and animals, the growth of plants, and the cycles of the sun and moon correspond with each other in meaningful ways, all part of the essentially ordered nature of the created world. And so I think what Bede and Ælfric and even Eleanor Parker here are getting at is that humans are natural in a sense. They're all part of this great world, and it's all part of God's plan. Essentially, it's the plan of this creator, right? And it might not all be obvious in a sense when you're living in a world that is very much not like our modern society is, right? Which we're not very connected with a lot of natural things in many ways, right? It's harder to see in some ways, in some fashions, but for the medieval peoples, it'd be very obvious, right? And you would get some of that knowledge also by being in tune with this calendar, which is one of the reasons for this project, actually, is this liturgical calendar really helped me connect with the world, in a sense, with this nature, also with this idea of God's plan, right? In a sense, right? And also just tradition. I mean, like my own, from my own experience, I'm really not connected culturally much at all. So what a lot of this traditional early medieval or just Christian tradition in general. So I hope this helps. Maybe you get some more information on this, some more knowledge, and some idea of how the Anglo-Saxons would have celebrated this time of midsummer, how it wasn't actually quite lined up with the solstice, but it's still a day to celebrate, and how it is a day of going down. Essentially, it's at the height, so we can celebrate that. And this is going to lead us over into the winter solstice for Nativity of Christ. Anyways, thank you for watching.